Alright, hello everyone, this is John, and in this video today I'm going to show how to split data from one column into multiple columns using Microsoft Excel. So to provide a quick example of some data, we can see here there's a single column that is filled with multiple data points, but the problem is with all these data points being contained in one column, we have very little ability to properly interpret them. So the whole premise in this video really is going to spread this data from this one single column into adjacent columns and spread it across multiple columns so it can be properly interpreted. So what I'm going to do is show this within a spreadsheet, different examples of how you can spread data that's being contained into one column over multiple columns and different ways you can interpret and summarize it. So to begin, I just wanted to provide an example to just provide some context on what the data is and how it's going to be interpreted. So for this example, there was a hotel survey that was provided to patrons. Individuals stayed at a hotel, and while they were at the hotel, they were asked about which facilities and services they were accessing during their stay. So down below is coding for various facilities and services at the hotel, where we have, for example, 1 equals pool, 2 equals fitness center, 3 equals TV movie rentals, etc., etc. These are the different services that they could access. And what is being provided, for example, in this table here is each person and the services that they access during their time. So we could see for this first person here, actually let me show it on this other spreadsheet. We can see for this first person here, they access services 1, 2, and 6. And when we look across the columns that we'll be organizing momentarily, that would be 1, they access the pool, 2, they access the fitness center, and then 6, which is the final one, they access the Wi-Fi internet. So these are the different services these individuals accessed, and now what we're going to do is spread them across the columns in appropriate manner using provided code in Microsoft Excel and syntax that you might want to use yourself. So we have our example. The first method I want to show is a very traditional Microsoft Excel method. This involves going to the data menu and selecting text to columns. The reason I'm showing this is because this is one more traditional method of spreading data from one column into multiple columns, but I also want to show why it could be a good example to use, but why it could also not be a good example to use. So let's run this first one. This is just our example spreadsheet here. Let's go down to the traditional method. So what you'd have to do is highlight your data, go to data, text to columns, and then here you select everything's being, let me actually move this over a bit. Everything's being separated by a comma, so delimited is good. We click next. Once again, it's commas, so we can get rid of tab. And then here it's asking for the destination, and here you have two options. You can begin in destination A, which would be column A, but it'll completely rewrite your original column that is crammed with all this data. You could rewrite it, but that's not something I ideally would like to do. So I'm going to spread it to column B, because at the same time that's the way I have my spreadsheet organized, that I'd like the data to start being spread around column B and then so on. So let's click finish. And here we are. The data has been now captured from this one column and spread across multiple. As you probably noticed, there's some errors with this method. We do not have all the 1s under column B with pool. We do not have all the 2s under column C, which is fitness center. It spread the data, but it didn't spread it in a logical order that we can still interpret it. So although this is one method that could be used, you could see some of the flaws to this example, as it makes it very difficult for us to interpret the data. So now let's go to a more appropriate method that can be used in Microsoft Excel to help you spread your data and interpret it in a meaningful way. So here I've actually written out the code or syntax, if you will, that would be included in your Microsoft Excel document to help spread your data across appropriate columns. This involves you using the if statement, ISERROR statement, and find statement. Within this one bracket here is where you would be putting some of your key information. I have 1 in quotations, meaning for every time we hit the value, let's code it as a 1. Meaning, like, for example, here we're using the pool as an example, so 1 equals pool. So in this example, if they have a pool, if they said they accessed the pool, let's give it a 1 and put it in column 1. And then the ref number is really just the row. We're going to use the row that for each individual and place this code per individual. So if they access the pool and it is true, we're going to give it a 1. But if they did not access the pool, meaning it is not true, we're going to give it a 0. So that's exactly it. Here below I've added a bit more information. For example, if an individual is in row A25, we're going to be applying 1 in that column to see if they access the pool, which is true or false, or, as I'll show momentarily, yes or no. So let's scroll down a bit further and show a more appropriate method, in my opinion, on how to actually spread this data and interpret it properly. So using the syntax that I just provided here, I'm showing that for one pool, for this individual in row 25, we're using the code, which is all here highlighted. We are saying that if they access the pool, let's find 1 within their code, within their data here in A25. So if there's a 1 in this person's data, give it a true equal to 1. If there is not a 1 in this person's data, give it a 0. So if we click enter, it's given it a value of 1 because there's obviously a 1 within the answers this person provided. If we go a bit further down, we can see here this person accessed 2, 3, 4, 6, only these services which are coded up above here, but they did not access the pool. So we can see why it would be a 0 here, because when it's looking for a 1 in row A26, it does not come up as true equals 1, it comes up as true equals 0, hence it is false, so we get a 0. So that's the way the code would work, and it is an appropriate way to help actually provide a binary logic to information provided by individuals. You can see this bottom row here I didn't actually fill in, but because the code is already being provided, 1 A29, all we have to do is grab that plus sign. You can see here there's that plus sign that's being highlighted, and then just pull it down. So therefore they get a 0 as well, because once they didn't access the pool. So if we quickly go to the second column here, the only thing that changed within our code, where we have a 1 for pool, the only difference now is we're giving it a 2. And the 2 is to help code for fitness center. So for example, in this first individual here in row 25, they have a 1 because it's being asked to find a 2 in row A25. If the 2 is present, let's give it a 1 equaling true. If the 2 is not present, let's give it a 0 equaling false, right? So we can click enter, and of course there is a 2. And of course this one row is not finished, but we can complete the row because the code is all being present. And once again, you can see for row 3 we're looking for a 3. If the 3 is in one of the rows, click enter and it should work. So let's move this down, and we could finish the rest of our rows like this, and it works quite well. So there's the 4 and then the 5. So you can see here there's 1s for both of these because it was looking for 5 in column 30, which it did, and here it's looking for 4 in column 30, which it did. And that is one way to do it. A bit further down here, I'm just showing that a lot of this data has been organized in a logical order from lowest to greatest, but that doesn't really matter for this type of code, meaning you can run this same type of code without having that issue, because ideally, that was not meant to happen there, I apologize. because ideally it's going to look for these values regardless of the order with the way that the data is being structured. So whether it is whether it's backwards or if it's in a random order, that doesn't matter. It's still going to find the code. So for example, if we pull down this 1, it found a 1 even though the 1 is at the very end of the code. So you can see right away, even with backwards or random order, this has the ability to still provide that binary logic and properly code your data in a meaningful way. But let's say, for example, you don't want ones and zeros. You'd rather have a pure yes or no logic within your data set. Using that same code as before, you can apply that. So here we have yes, yes, no, 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 and yes. So the idea here is we're providing a yes or no statement for whether that individual accessed those services or not. The only difference is in the code, if I return to this, is if you look at the bottom here, where 0 would equal false and 1 would equal true, all we're doing is adding quotations with the statement that we want. So in quotations no would be false, and in quotations yes would be true. So once again, using the exact same code here, we're providing just yes or no statements. And of course, you just grab that plus sign and we could fill in the rest of the columns like so. Quite simple. Anyway, let's continue down. And we can see here, even if the values are backwards or in a random order, once again, it doesn't matter. Did this individual access service 1? Yes, they did. Did this individual access service 2? Yes, they did. Of course, you can see it here, but the whole premise in ordering data like this, or at least providing this code, is that if you have multiple sets of data that are all being crammed into one column like this, meaning multiple individuals, you're going to want a syntax. You're not going to want to go through it manually. It's going to lead to a lot more chance for error, and it's just going to be extremely time consuming and probably a huge headache. Okay, so there's one more method I want to show. It's a little bit more of a complex method, but the reason I'm showing this is because I just want to demonstrate that there's multiple ways in Microsoft Excel of doing the same thing. There's multiple ways of getting to the same result just using different code. So as we can see here, this code is much different compared to the original code which I had above, but this code is actually providing the same service, or it's providing the same solution as our code up above. But there is some caveats to this code. In my opinion, it's a little too complex for what we're trying to do in this situation, but this is a type of code I've seen people use. What this code requires is, let me quickly go back to my example here and show you. So this is the more complex method being provided here, but what this code is requiring is an additional row above. So it's asking is if the 1 in this row matches a 1 in this row, give it a 1. If a 2 in this row matches a 2 in this row, give it a 1. And if there's a 3 in this one and it matches a 3 in this one, give it a 0. So that's literally the logic that's being applied here. So if we look back at the code, we're saying if there's a match, let's give it a 1. If not, we're just going to give it a 0, and then we're going to use the ISERROR and find function. These quotes are just helping show that there's space between the rows and columns, but it's really this part right here that's pretty important. There's a money sign being placed between these two values for the column, right? So we have B6 but money sign, and that money sign, what it is saying is when we look at these values here, it is fixating this pinpoint on this certain placeholder, meaning when we pull down this value here and get a 0, it is taking that 0 because there's a mismatch between 53 right here, B, and this one. So what this code is really doing is just saying keep it fixed on one specific placeholder. So when you're scrolling down through your data, applying this code, Sure, the row is changing on the side here, but this specific placeholder at the top is being fixed. So meaning it doesn't matter how many values or rows you are applying this code to, it is always going to be fixated on one specific placeholder here, and that's what's happening. This money sign is keeping it fixed at a certain position within your data. So it's a little bit more of a complex code, but it's still serving the same purpose. You can pretty much change the values you want also within your code. Right now, if we look at it, it's saying here that it's just showing the standard code that we're applying. But if you really want it, and what you could do is you can add an extra value at the end here. So what it would be doing is, instead of providing a 1 for a match and a 0 for a no, it could be providing a 2 for a match and a 1 for a no. Really, there's many ways of doing this, but this is just one way of using codes in different manners to do the same purpose. But let's continue down, because the whole premise in showing these was that now by spreading the data across multiple columns, we can now properly summarize the data in meaningful ways. So for example, if we go across this one individual here that accessed services that included the pool, fitness center, and Wi-Fi internet, if we go across, we can see that they accessed a total of 3 services. And then the same thing here, this individual accessed, looks like the fitness center, TV movie rentals, restaurant, Wi-Fi internet. We're summarizing it, and now we get a total that they have used a total of the 4 services. This is very simple to do. All we're doing is we're just highlighting all these points here, going to formula, and then auto sum. And you can see right away it automatically did that. And then now that we have the formula in place, we can use that plus sign, drag it down, and therefore we'll get the summary or auto sum for each of the other individuals as well. And the same logic is being applied down here at this other total bar right down here, this row. What it's saying here is how many individuals access the pool. Well, it looks like it's only 2. How many individuals access the fitness center? Well, it's 3. And for example, we can go on and on, but the Autosum function still works the same. All you would do is now highlight, go to Autosum, and there you go. We have 2 individuals access the restaurant. We can pull this across now. 3 individuals access the hotel concierge or talk to the hotel concierge, and of course we have 5 individuals all using the Wi-Fi. So that's a very simple way of making sense of your data that's all being crammed into one column. Spread it out across multiple columns using this function, or this code if you will, and then you can quickly auto sum rows and columns to make sense of how many services each person accessed and how many individuals accessed each service. Let's go a bit further down now, because if you use string statements like this, the code is a bit different when it comes to summarizing. So for example, if you have yes, no statements, to get a total sum, you actually can't use the Autosum function. It's going to come back with an error. So for example, if I highlight this and click Autosum, okay, that didn't work there. My apologies. Let's undo that. We can highlight it and auto sum. See, now it's already accessing all the other stuff which we don't want it to do. So that's not good. But what we're going to do is show that to get this total sum here, if I quickly go back to my PowerPoint, so yeah, for summation of numerical values, we're simply just using the sum function. But summation of yes or no answers, we're going to use what's called the count if function for yes. So if anything says yes within our count if function, we're going to give it a value. So let's go back here. So it's saying here count if, and we're using rows B75 to B80. If it's a yes, click enter, give it a value. So you could do the opposite for no if you wanted. If you wanted the no results, or if you want the yes, it's up to you. But we can continue. Let me highlight this really quickly, and I'll apply it here. So, oops, sorry, making a mess there. So we're going to highlight it. and well, let's do it here. Let's paste, and we're gonna do not B75 to B80, we're gonna do E75 to E80. Click yes, and there you go. Once again, works pretty well. If we want to do another column, we can. This one is F75 to F80. Click enter, and there you go. A little bit more effort required, but it's still really the same process. If we look at the row here for each individual, the method is still the same. We're just going B75 to G75 to get a total. So once again, the method is literally the exact same. If we go down now to our more complex method, because once again, these are just binary coded with numerical values, we can just use the simple summation rule. The summation will work just fine, and you should have no problem running that. So if we quickly go back, if we go to this row here, because this row doesn't have a summation, we highlight it, 2, no problem. Let's highlight this, summation, no problem. No problem. And let's say we do one of these rows where we don't have a total score for this individual. No problem. So regardless of whether you're using a string value like here, ones or zeros, or if you're going to give it an actual statement like a yes or no, both methods can be summarized. Just remember, if it's a numerical value, you're going to use the summation function, but if it's a string value like a yes or no, you're going to use the count if. But yeah, that's pretty much the whole premise of this tutorial, is really just to show you how to spread data from one specific column like so into multiple rows, but in a way that is meaningful and can be interpreted, but also summarized for further analysis, just like so. Thank you for watching. If you have any suggestions or methods to improve these sort of steps or methods, please feel free to comment. Thank you very much for watching.